Hello world, this is JWP, J Ward Primo Beats, coming to you live from my home studio. For around 20 years, I've been mixing and mastering music, rapping, songwriting, recently started singing, along with everything else that goes with music production, such as graphic design, editing, photo editing, video editing. And for around 15 years, I've been using SynthEdit to make my own audio plugins. Check out my website, jwpsite.com, for my social links, latest news and updates, and public offerings. My Twitch, JWP stream, Facebook, JWP Meta, YouTube at JWPTube. If you'd like to help support what I do, check out my Patreon, JWP Patreon. That's with 2 P's. There's exclusive content there for making your own audio plugins in SynthEdit. My GoFundMe, JWP Fund, or my PayPal, jwpmas@gmail.com. Likes, comments, subscribes, follows, whatever makes you click are appreciated. So I'll be continuing along with the Visual VST/I programming book. And today I'll be looking at dynamic processing. Dynamic processing. These processors shape a signal's dynamic and dynamic range. Compressors, limiters, expanders, and gates are the most common types. This book's scope is limited to explaining compressors and limiters, but expanders and gate structures are very similar. Compressors limit a signal's dynamic range, reducing its amplitude above a given threshold, sometimes called makeup gain. A gain control boosts the softer part of the signal. A ratio control adjusts compression by determining the ratio between input and output levels. Set the ratio to 2 to 1 and the compressor halves the signal's level above the threshold. Figure 2.82 graph shows some compressor/limiter transfer curves. Any ratio above 10 to 1 constitutes limiting. Peak limiters' ratio is generally infinite to 1. This equates to hard clipping, strictly maximizing the output level. So in the illustration here, figure 0.82, compressors limiter transfer curves, we see a box, a graph really with the y-axis output level decibel, and then the x-axis input level decibel with a diagonal line from the bottom left to the top right, representing ratio 1 to 1. And then halfway through the graph, we have a dotted line coming from the bottom to the top in the middle, and then from the middle, very middle, veering off into multiple directions, demonstrating 2 to 1 ratios, 4 to 1 ratios, 10 to 1 ratio, and infinite to 1 ratio. Figure 2.83 outlines the general scheme of a dynamic processor. You see 2 paths in the diagram. The detection path determines the peak or RMS level and calculates the amount of gain reduction, which the processor then applies to the main path. So in figure 2.83, dynamic processors work like this. We see a flow chart with a top arrow heading to an X, and then continuing over that first top arrow branches off down and to the right into a box that says level detection, and then another arrow pointing at one that says gain reduction, and then gain calculation rather, and that box points back to the X. Compressors level detectors sport 2 controls, attack and release. Attack determines how fast the compressor cuts the gain when it detects a signal level exceeding the threshold. The release value determines how fast the signal returns to its original level once it drops back below the threshold. Peak limiters' response to sudden peaks must be instantaneous, so hard limiters only have a release control. Setting up a peak limiter. Figure 2.84 captures the structure of a simple peak limiter in all its signal routing glory. The pre-gain knob adjusts the incoming signal level. A DH_max module available from David Happ's basic module pack takes the louder part of 2 channels, linking the left and right channels gain reduction to preserve the stereo image. This signal then goes to the level detector, a peak follower, and insert modifiers peak follower. The attacks plug value is 0 volts, ensuring it responds immediately to sudden peaks. The release knob adjusts the limiter's decay rate. The attack/decay knob's range is 1, which is 20 milliseconds. It shows a sort of transition volts equals to 20 milliseconds rather. And the readout is scaled accordingly. A word on the release knob. The multiply module squares the voltage before feeding it out. This means the knob scale is exponential. Well, sort of. In any case, it brings greater definition to low release times. To set high and low values, enter the target's values square roots to the min value and max value plugs. Figure 2.8, a simple peak limiter structure. Limiter 1.se. So in the diagram or in the figure, we see an input mod going into a container that says LevelAdj and a knob saying pregain going into that same container. And from the input mod, we have input 1, input 2 that heads out to a multiply, which in turn heads out to a peak meter. And that same LevelAdj heads into a DH_max, which in turn heads into a peak follower signal in, and there is a release knob entering into the decay of the peak follower. And the peak follower heads into a DH_voltage to decibel, which in turn heads to a subtract. And in the subtract, we have a knob heading into the second part of the subtract, which is threshold. Subtract then heads into a clipper. The clipper heads into an inverter, which heads into a GR peak meter. In other words, gain reduction, acronym for gain reduction. That heads into the last LevelAdj, and that LevelAdj has the first ADJ signal coming directly in. That ADJ again heads into another multiplier, and that heads into a peak follower or a peak meter, which says out. And then there is a IO mod for the out from the LevelAdj. Once the compressor detects the peak, David Happ's DH voltage to decibel meter converts the level into decibels. Dynamic processors generally work with decibels rather than linear voltages. Though not compulsory for peak limiters, it does make levels easier to handle. Then the compressor subtracts the threshold value from the decibel level. If the level lies above the threshold, positive values give the gain reduction in decibels. Negative voltages are a no-go, so a clipper insert effects clipper module clips negative voltages to 0. The compressor then inverts the gain reduction value to apply it to the main signal. The formula for this is GR subscript dB equals negative max, left bracket in, subscript dB less threshold, subscript dB, comma, 0, right bracket. The peak meter shows the exact levels to help users keep track of the signal status. We use the peak meter 2 prefab from the Insert Controls menu. Note that the prefab's volt to float module converts the level to animation. Open this module's properties menu and you will see 2 settings, response and update rate. In-out peak meters employ a decibel peak setting with fast response. The gain reduction meter uses volts DC fast because the signal is already in decibels. The prefab converts the 2 channels to mono before displaying the meters. Heads up, lower the release value, increases harmonic distortion. Set the release to 0 and the limiter behaves like a hard clipper distorting module. You may want to limit the release parameter's low value to prevent this. This prefab's low value is 1 millisecond. Extreme settings may elicit serious distortion. The peak limiter in version 1.0150 may leak signals at very high levels and low release rates, possibly causing more clipping and distortion. So something to keep in mind. So that's the end of that section. To head into SynthEdit 1.4 here. I have the AQ parameter 4 open, the parametric equalizer open from the previous documentation / tutorial. So I also have SynthEdit 1.1 here with the original prefab from the book. It's open. And I've already gone ahead and saved this and renamed this container. This is, however, the parametric EQ4. All right, time to start building. I'm going to keep some of these knobs. I'm just going to look at the book here and look at the arrangement. Also have this version open. Okay, so first thing, got 3 knobs, and was it 3 peak meters? So keep this at least. And 2 more knobs, right? Alright, so that saves a bit of time. This is actually called pre-gain. J over here. Let's over that again. And then bringing in the outputs, or the inputs rather. Let's call these inputs. As well on here as well. Of course, they don't update right away until something happens. It's fine. Then I want a DH max multiply it. So I'm going to be doing everything here with stock modules. There is not a DH max or a max of any sort in SynthEdit. However, there is a way to create a max. Put the low value 10 here using a comparator. Put the low value 10 and 0. And then okay, this is from that. Looking at this, so I'm just going to finish up with the LevelAdj first. That goes to DH max, right? Okay, so in order for this to work, I want a flow control, and this is many to 1. And the comparator compares the 2 signals, and then uses a volt to list to switch between them. So it'll take the max signal of the 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I plug them in here, and then again I plug them in here. And that's essentially a max determination. Then that goes to peak follower. So bringing in a peak follower here under modifiers. Out of the way. And signal in. And I'm going to do this meter first too. So we use a math module here. Multiply. And then we go multiply by 0.5, which is essentially divide by 2. And taking both signals, I'm just going to make sure it's from, yes, it is, from the LevelAdj here. Both going into the top. So left and right going into the top of the multiplier, and the bottom value here being 0.5, which essentially is divide by 2. Then from controls, I'm going to go peak meter, drop that here, plug that in. Now I have a peak meter. I'm just going to tidy things up on the GUI here. Pre-gain first, and in out, looking like those numbers aren't going to play well with the background there. How does that look here? It's about the same. So then in the peak follower, looks like there's just a release. So attack, I'm going to make sure that's set to 0. And then bringing in a release here. And my value is milliseconds. So I'm going to change this hertz to milliseconds. So MS. And then the range. Imagine. Okay. Okay. So it looks like 2000 milliseconds. Or 2 seconds. So high value of 2000. And the name of it is release. I'm going to plug that into decay here. Remember making sure attack is set to 0. Now I'm going to line it up. It's already lined up. And check. Okay. All right. So at this point, we require a volts to decibel, which can be acquired from a third-party dev. A lot of people have them. TD modules. Rob Herder, I believe Elena has one. Almost every third-party module developer has one. For the most part, they are the same. In the inside, the same programming. There is something called fast math, and then there is standard calculations. Standard calculations is a little harder on the CPU. Fast math is easier. They do sound a little different. I'm not 100% sure exactly what's inside of everybody's third-party module. I do have mine. However, in this case, I will be using a sort of stock version that I devised myself. And in order to get that, you will have to join my Patreon. As I said, you can get the volts to decibel and decibel to volts from most third-party vendors. However, this is a vanilla or stock version, and it'll be available in the prefab on my Patreon. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to that. Then from there, we're going to subtract. So math, subtract. Top. And then from there, we have the threshold knob. As well, I have to change this amount. So the peak follower, this is going to help here. It says the attack and decay can be converted to milliseconds by multiplying by 20, i.e. 1 volt equals 20 milliseconds. So if we go 20 here, what is the low value? I believe that's supposed to be 1. Go 20, I'm going to check that to see exactly what this is supposed to be. It is 0.224. So I guess I'm going to take that. That must be 1, right? % sure 1 is fine. Actually, let's go 0.224 because that sounds like an interesting number. What does that look like here? 0.02. Okay. Or that does have to be converted. So math-wise, again, I want it before the float. Float to volt. Then I do believe to multiply by 20. The thing is closed. So 1 volt equals 20 milliseconds. But I want to invert that, right? So that whatever comes out of here, the peak follower will see that because the value here has to be in milliseconds and it changed itself. So let's put that to 224 back in here, and I believe it was 2000 or 20 milliseconds or 20 seconds. 2 seconds. Move this to 20 milliseconds here. And that should be 1. Let's bring the calculator back. 20 times 0.05. Yeah, 1. So it is 0.05. It's 20 milliseconds is 1 volt. So I'm going to punch that into the math here. So in other words, that's multiplying or dividing by 20. So it's backwards, right? And I just want to double check that with the voltmeter here. And go ahead and run it. Yeah, so that's 1 volt. Equivalent to 20 milliseconds. And triple check. 1 volt equals 20 milliseconds. Okay. And take that out. I'm now at the point of threshold, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and type in threshold. I believe the prefab just says thresh. So let's see how well that fits. Yeah, that's fine. And it looks like this also changed its name. So let's change it back. Okay, and then threshold goes into the bottom, right? Yes, into the bottom of subtract. And then we bring in clipper. So from effects, clipper. And this top value, I believe, is 99999. Let's go check that. That's not how we put it. I have to go properties. So that's 5 nines. I'm just going to copy that over with a low limit of 0. And that is apparently supposed to stop negative values. Okay, so subtract the clipper to inverter. Subtract the clipper, and then modifiers inverter here as well. From after the inverter, it goes to another peak meter. This peak meter specifically is gain reduction and has a different sort of readout. However, I'm going to quickly bring in a text entry here. Just drop that on top. Actually, I believe this is locked. More locked. I can change it. Drop that here. Call this in. And line that up. It's really big. Let's shrink that. Here, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. That's fine. Actually, 3, 4. Are they all capital? No, just GRs. Not sure why. Imagine it's just because it's an acronym, right? Let's see how that lines up. It's in that variable. And things aren't probably going to line up at all here. So we go not writable, which is also important. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4. See how that lines up. Okay, so that's where it's at here. Copy that over, and I want to bring that here. And again, this is locked, so I'm going to unlock this more. Locked. Hit inside here and drop that down. So this is copied over, and I want to rename this to GR. And before I had mentioned that it's better to use a patch memory to hold values, but I recently discovered that I don't actually need to. And I'm just going to confirm that after I get this lined up here. Okay, so I'm just going to tuck this into the corner. And bring this over here. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. And okay, so in order to check if we actually need a patch memory, I'm just going to save and change the prefab. Okay, so it did hold its name, in fact. This looks kind of funny. This one looks like it's off to the side. So gain reduction needs to be realigned here. So it does look like they're sitting on top of the peak meter opposed to being in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's move this over. Here. It's already there, right? Okay. Now I'll just line it up. think it might be last. Is it last? It is. Okay. Over. Then threshold. So threshold is based on decibels. And I believe it goes to -40. So low value of -40 with a high value of 0. In fact, I do believe this preset actually goes into a positive. No, it does not. Okay. I believe the later prefab goes into a positive, attempting to be an expander. However, if we're clipping it, expansion is not possible. So this now goes into the peak meter here. This is the gain reduction peak meter. Let's get this threshold lined up. It says hertz. I want that to say decibels. dB. Make sure there's no conversions. It in fact does not need a conversion because we're already in the volts to decibel. We're in the decimal domain, right? It's decibel. Then just preset that to 0. Inverters in. From the inverter, I go to the LevelAdj here, which in turn goes into decibel to volts inside. So it doesn't directly connect to the LevelAdj. There is a decibel to volts here, which is, again, vanilla or stock, which is only available from my Patreon. So after that, in any case, you'd only need to use the recording third-party module. I do not offer my versions of the third-party module. Not a module developer right now. I'm doing this. Okay, so then from there we want the ADJ in to out, or the ADJ to ADJ. So this is the direct line. What's happening here is it's detecting the signal and then it's checking out where it is at, and then it's turning it down here, right? So we want the original signal to turn down. The signal we just passed through was sort of a detection signal. Now that's all set up and done. I want another multiply. I'm just going to copy this one over and drop that here. And this is a reading. Again, both of them to the top one, and the bottom one is multiplying by 0.05, or in other words, divide by 2. And it's just safer to use multiply, as multiply can handle 0 and division cannot handle division by 0. So from there, I want the IO mod. Here and there, and we now have a stereo limiter. So check everything checks out. Okay, and then just line up the GUI here. This actually should say out. We're supposed to say out. Will say out, whatever I can find. I guess that's the disadvantage of using the text entry like this without having a patch memory, is that I can't see what's in here, right? This is the patch memory here for the actual patch memory float, whereas the text entry doesn't have a value to alter from the top. However, I do believe that this pin, this pot here, will hold that value. I'm going to drop it in, and I'll find out on build, I guess, right? And that's where it's at. Just tighten things up here. It's supposed to actually say release. Threshold. And these over, I don't know why they're off the grid. Since some of them are off grid here. Yeah, out was off grid. Tighten into each other, and then just a little bit of GUI stuff. Tighten it up. Top and bottom with a bit of space on the side. And fix the preset manager after setting the canvas. Okay, so background here, just pull it into range, center the name. Again, off grid, so I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, and bring this over. Okay. So that's done. Go ahead and save that and export it. I believe it's still holding the parametric equalizer name. So I'm just going to call this limiter. Limiter and then SCLI. Manufacturer name again ABCD. Want to use the K. Output at stereo plugs. Okay. Save file first. Yes. Okay. So then I'm going to head into file here and I'm going to give it a test run. Nothing too serious. Just going to check that my audio is in fact coming in. It is. Okay. So I want to do a fast scan here. So into the plugs and then install, right click. Can be any of the folders, refresh plugin list fast scan. So you can right click any of the folders within the plugin database. Okay. So now I'm just going to bring in a quick drum kit here. I'm going to use, I guess, Drum Max, just something that has some prefabs installed already, some beats already ready to go. Let's go hip hop. Top one, no, let's go booty shaker, I guess. Then head here, we got a few patterns. So I'll just go with 0. It's quite fast. I'm gonna slow that down. And let's go one time around. See if it just go like that. I think it might just go around one time, right? Okay. Then I'm gonna send that to channel 1 and bring in the. I'm gonna turn this up as well. Right. Okay, I don't want to be clipping. Down a bit. Still clipping. They're peaking. Okay, so that's fine. Somewhere around 3. It is the digital domain, so it's not gonna distort. However, I still want to stay in that safe zone. Okay, so bringing the limiter in. I forgot it doesn't actually have any presettings. I'm just gonna check the gainer. Actually, that's a bad idea because then it's driving into the limiter itself. Okay. So turn up the release here. Let's say about 300. And what to watch for here is I'm coming in around 3, between 3 and 6. When I start to pull down the threshold, anything below 3 and 6 is going to start to limit, right? And you can see the gain reduction limiter happening. So I'm still not touching it because I'm only going to 3 now. If we go 6, let's see, it's starting a little bit. And then let's try go about 9. You can see it's actually staying at 6, right? So let's go 9. Okay, so now gain reduction is happening. And it's sticking around 9. It's not precisely 9 because our release is still quite loose. So let's tighten that up, say 150. And it should be now limiting hard at 9. Which it is not, because I got pre-gain on. No, that shouldn't matter. It's just some leakage, I suppose. It's not a perfect limiter. It does not have a look ahead. I do believe it is not running any latency. No, it's not running any latency, so it's just a quick and dirty limiter. However, the fun gets in when we start to overlimit and we pull in this release. So what I was talking about, hard clipping, it gives it like a flavor, right? So let's pull it into about 20 and start to really drive here. So I'm going to actually use the pre-gainer to drive into the compressor. In fact, I'm going to bring this up a bit here, come up to 3, and I'm going to drive into it about 6. Give it a little bit of flavor. Let's go 12. That kick is starting to really get raunchy. So 24. And there's some raunch there, right? And that's because of the release. So if I switch the release to about 150, that's generally called pumping. And the release is too tight. So let's bring it all the way in, and warning, it's going to get pretty raunchy. You can see the waveform here. It's just hard clipping, right? Let's back off of it, back to 20. And unfortunately, the pre-gain drive only goes 18. We're already starting to do that hard clip. But we can still use the threshold, so let's back it down a bit. As well, we can use sort of a oscilloscope. See what it's really doing. So here is quite clipped, quite driven. And here is, oops, not that. Here is without. We can see that it's really bringing that signal consistently through and really chopping off the attack transient. Limiters are generally supposed to be for obviously limiting the top. However, it doesn't look like this is such a safe limiter because it does have leakage. We are actually passing 0 even though it's set to 0. And looking at something like span, you can see the true peak here is 2.83. So I wouldn't use it as a limiter. It's not safe, in my opinion. Bringing it down and resetting the meter here. It's kind of in the same world, actually. But that's true peak, right? The decibel full scale. Just peak, regular peak. So it's staying under there, but it's true peak. We're gonna get intersample peak distortion, which is a topic for another time. So I'll end this part here. I'm just going to take a quick BRB and I will be back for more dynamics. Putting together a peak compressor. A hard knee peak compressor is much like a limiter shown above. Figure 2.85 depicts the structure. You'll find some differences though. An attack knob adjusts how fast the compressor responds to signals above the threshold. The gain knob connects to the LevelAdj module for the main signal, which lets users dial in post-compression to make up gain. The ratio knob adjusts the amount of compression. Figure 2.85, a hard knee peak compressor, file compressor1.se1. So similar to the first figure of the limiter. In addition, now we have, I'll just explain it. So I'll mod into a DH max, into a peak follower, into a voltage to dB, into a subtract, into a clipper, into a multiply. Now subtract has been moved. A ratio knob goes into a divide on the bottom. Fixed values with the value 1 is into the top of the divide as well as the subtract. And divide goes into the bottom of the subtract, which goes into the same multiply that the clipper is in. So that's pretty much the main difference, besides there's now an attack knob plugged into the peak follower's attack. The compressor does nothing to the sound at a 1:1 ratio knob setting. Set it to 120 and you'll dial in some serious compression. This structure takes the ratio's reciprocal and then subtracts it from 1, yielding a value range from 0.11 to 0.95, 20 to 1. The compressor multiplies the difference between the input level and threshold by this value. This is how the ratio setting determines the amount of gain reduction. The equation goes like this. Gain reduction subscript decibel equals negative max left bracket in subscript decibel subtract threshold subscript decibel comma 0 right bracket multiplied by large left bracket 1 negative 1 over ratio large right bracket. Go to files, effects, dynamics, compressor 1. Right, so this is where we are now. I've already gone ahead and saved the file in advance, as well as opened up the correlating SE1 file, compressor 1. here. So we're just going to evolve this schematic here into the compressor. That's pretty much why it's nice and spread out here. So looking at both the figure in the book and the preloaded version, I believe they're exactly the same. Most everything's already set up, right? So all that really needs to be changed, starting with the release attack. I'm going to bring in a new knobs, copy of the release, plug that into attack. Over in this case, I'm going to remove the 0.0224 or 0.224. Change that to 0. I'm going to look at the prefab and see what the amounts are here. So amount looks like my value of 10, the 0 to 10. I doubt it would be 0 to 5. Not sure what that is for. I'm going to check the release. Okay, so there's no holds bar with the release in this case. So let's see which knob moves. Now what does this one do? Okay, so that changes the numbers. So one is animation position and the other is the readout. It's just the version 1.1 of SynthEdit used to do things a little differently, and I'm not about to get into explaining that. So it looks like the release does not have a limit. So I'm going to pull that limit and change this release name to attack here. This is as well already plugged in. I'm going to pull the pre-gain here. I just want to make sure that it doesn't change anything. It does not. I'm going to cut that, move it over. Ooh. I pulled the whole thing. I didn't do that. So I just got to connect these back in and out. And cut the pre-gain, just the knob. And I'm going to plug that into the other LevelAdj. So this is out now. So this is gain makeup, right? So after it compresses, we now want to make up some gain. Whereas with a limiter, there's no real point in doing that. Okay. So majority of it's done. I do need to connect this multiply. Okay. Then I have to change this area of the algorithm here. So again, the subtract is moved over a little bit. We also have a multiply before the inverter. Still have over clipper. Most of the subtract is here. Okay. So there's an additional subtract and multiply. So after the clipper, I'm going to break this patch here, move this over, and bring in a subtract, multiply, and was it a divide as well? Yeah. And a divide. As well, should I err on the safe side? I cannot, because, well, there'll always be a 1 plugged into this divide, so it's now. I want a fixed values, and subtract plugs into the bottom of multiply, and clipper plugs into the top of multiply. And the fixed values plugs into the top of both divide and subtract. And I want to set this value, fixed value, to 1. With larger projects, you again want to have a global value variable, right? Too many fixed values can start to eat up memory and slow down load times. Okay, so I need a new knob here, ratio, which doesn't have sort of a readout. So it can be anyone. I'll just grab release because that's where my mouse is now. Bring it in, rename it ratio. And I'm going to plug it in before setting it, because if I set it after, it'll just reset itself. Like, I mean, the range will set to 10, right? So it looks like the majority of it's done. I just have to plug in the subtract multiplier. And then multiply the inverter. I want to go in here and get rid of this millisecond readout. And then can put sort of a 1 colon here before the 20 as well. It does look like there's a decimal place in the original prefab. Okay, so that's done, and there is no sort of conversion. Conversion sort of happens here within this small algorithm. And that looks like the peak compressor is done, because most of the other stuff has already been done. All right, the max is already there, and LevelAdj, everything else is done. I'm going to go ahead and save that and build that. And this is called Compressor 1. And SCCO, ABCD as manufacturer. Okay, save file first, yes. And I forgot to do the GUI. I'm going to go ahead and do the GUI. Spread this out. And I'm just going to look at the GUI here. Okay, so threshold, attack, release, ratio, gain. So threshold is now over here. And I'm just going to get rid of this background. Get rid of it, just move it out of the way. Move these out of the way. And what did I say? Threshold, attack, release, gain. Ratio? Where's ratio? Before gain. Okay, so attack, release, ratio, gain. Tighten that up. And then bring the meters back in. This is off. What was the original? That's really tight. I can't remember. I'll spread it a bit. Or tighten it up. Preference to tighter. Saving precious visual space, right? Without it looking too cluttered. Well, how wide was it? Yeah, so we'll spread it out. Just to keep things consistent. Oops. So just a bit of GUI considerations here. Meters back in. And how did those sit? Yeah, it's not the right spot. Looks a little close. Back off one. It's equivalent. And fix stuff around here. About there, right? Yep. Then the preset manager here. And I guess I consider it default. 1, 2, 3, 4, just to center that. And for default, 0 is fine. Ratio, whoa, that's way too much. Okay, so top end of the ratio is 20, and it's important to set the bottom end of the ratio to 1 because 0 just makes weird stuff happen. And as well, the threshold, are we getting to the point where we're adding now? So I don't know why the preset has an add, because the limiter, like the clipper, doesn't allow to go in the opposite direction. So I'm just going to follow the preset verbatim. However, there's no real point in having an extra 10 on top. Yeah, I'm not sure why it does, because it can't expand with that clipper there, right? Yeah. It's messed. Okay, so default attack will be 0, and then default release, I guess I'll put 300-ish. 300 millisecond. Then ratio to 1, right? As I said, 0 is a weird number for a ratio, which can cause problems as far as just really clippy, garbagey sound. Okay, so that's done. Save that, compressor 1, and build it again. Then it's done, pretty much instantaneous. Rescan here. Okay, so I still have the original limiter on the drums here. In this case, I'm just going to bring in an instrument to sort of compress. In this case, I want a guitar. I'm going to go with flex. And do have some stuff loaded. I got essential guitars here. Let's get something clean. Chill guitar. And a couple humbuckers. I'm just going to turn all this off. Sounds like there's like a... There's a pad sitting in there, I think. Pad mix here. Let's turn that off. Okay, is this dynamic? Sounds like it has a round robin, but I don't really hear any dynamics. Okay, yeah, so we've got a couple multi-samples. Alright, so then I'm going to go ahead and do a riff machine thing here. I'm actually going to head to the next pattern. Quick riff machine, something with lots of dynamics. It's too much. Just one, two. Just throw the dice a couple times. In fact, I'm going to look and see where this drum is, just so I know where a root is, so these things don't really bump into each other. In order to do that, I need a span. And let's go back to pattern 1, play that drum. F. It's actually F sharp. Okay, so I want something in F. So it's playing well with the kick. Okay, so pattern 2 here. Again, I'm going to riff machine. So I want something with chords and lots of dynamics. Chords must be rare, so let's give it a couple more rolls. It's not a lot of dynamics. There we go. Okay, and I want this in F, right? So switch to F. Just reset it first. F. Oh, there's no okay, so let's try F major somewhere. Let's get. Okay, not a lot of dynamics. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do scale levels, reset, and then just change the tension here. Multiply. Just to give it some more depth, so to speak. Now if we look at decibel meter, we should have some difference. Is the limiter still on? Yeah, so we do have quite a bit of depth. That's very loud. Even with all that velocity, it's still quite quiet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to boost it a bit here. And I'll use the internal multiplier. So cog wrench. Let's go about 50. Some body. Then let's bring in that drum just to see how they contrast against each other. Drums killer. It's because it's loud, right? So we'll go ahead and go in here and just bring this down. We gain level 6 and cut at 9-ish. Still really quiet. I'm gonna drive 9. I'll just boost this guitar somewhere. Let's go 75. Not really getting anything out of it, eh? Maybe Flex isn't listening to this knob here. It is. Why it's not pushing past a certain amount here. There's no compressor on there, is there? Who's this? Didn't want to, but yeah, it's not giving me anything more here. I don't know why. It's just something Flex is doing. Internal limiter? Okay, so on the other hand, I guess I'm just going to have to drop this. So let's go 0 here and go -18. Let's just keep the juice. Okay, so then, just make sure that's coming through on stream. It is. Bring in the compressor here. And kill the drums. Compressor 1. And it's broken. You hear it a little bit. So that's why is it broken. Okay, so I do believe it doesn't need a LevelAdj here. Yeah, that's why it's broken, because there's a LevelAdj here. So what I can do, hopefully this doesn't mess it all up, is right-click more and containerize. And then again, I can grab one of these, right-click, delete retain wires. And again, with the other LevelAdj, delete retain wires. And now it's directly in. So hopefully that fixes. I'm just going to check the signal chain. Okay, so there's no through. That's what's missing. So let's get a through happening here. Not sure what happened to the through. Yeah, it's direct. Okay. Maybe there was a through there and I just didn't notice it. However, this is a better state here, so drop this. Okay, save file, yes. Okay, so the idea here is to get some attack, gain reduction, and a little bit of distortion. So the standard setting right now, again, when attaching a effect or inserting a synth, when you turn it on, it shouldn't affect the signal. In this case, it is. Why? That's strange. It's gained here, negative to plus. It's in, it's through. LevelAdj is there. Ratio, perhaps. It's boosting something, right? Okay, right here. So it's going right through. This is not actually passing through. My max wasn't connected. So when I pulled the first gainer, it broke the connection all over the place. That's the debugging section here. First, yes. I'm going to make sure to pull it initially too, right? Otherwise it won't build. Okay, so again. Still getting loudness increase. Yeah, still getting louder. Because the limiter was working fine. I don't know why. Getting a boost now. 10 through the signal. Ratio. Let's check the schematic here. Subtract. Subtract that to 1 on top of both, divide the subtracts. Into multiply. Multiply into inverter. Inverter into signal. Gain to level, level to out. Should work fine. So I'm going to pretend that it doesn't have a problem. I imagine it might be something to do with why it's not sending properly in the first place. Let's try a different plug here. Send it to 3. And I'm just going to unroute it. So I don't have to hear it. And just give it a signal. Pattern. Okay. And then add the compressor. And yeah, it's boosting. It's really strange. Ratio doesn't affect it. Attack doesn't. Release doesn't. Threshold perhaps doesn't do anything. Okay, something's wrong there, definitely. Something's wrong with the threshold. Okay. Debugging on stream. Hey, this is supposed to be documentation. So what's wrong with threshold here? Subtract. Maybe it's converting? No, there's no conversion. It's already in the decibel league. Threshold to subtract. The limiter worked fine. Did not have threshold. Does this need to be changed to something? I don't think so. No, it doesn't think so. Any changes. Cooper. Okay, so what's coming out of here? Subtract, right? Yes. See. Nominal. Looks like the right values. I mean, plus 10 doesn't really do anything. But let's give it another build here. Maybe I didn't build it. Sure I did, though. Same thing. It's the ratio. Yeah, I got a multiplier in the ratio. All right. Great documentation tutorial. Right. Okay, I gotta reset this as well. Totally changed its name and value. Okay. Missing steps. Skipping steps. Not good to skip steps, but debugging is also important. Exports. Okay. Yes. Then in, and it should not change the signal. No, right away it changes. Well, because it's ratio 0. As I said, ratio 0 is overload material. So I've got to limit that to 1. Then save again. Export again, rather. All right, bring in this compressor into this little guitar bit I have here. I'm just going to check that everything checked out after my debugging session. I had skipped a step and yeah, things weren't wired properly. So let's make sure that's set to 0. I'm actually going to head back to the schematic here and make sure that defaults at 0 because 0 is an overload value. Right. So now turning it on, it should not change the signal. It does. Threshold still be weird? Threshold doesn't do anything. Gain does. Oh, ratio. That's what I want. That's why. Threshold didn't do anything. But still, it shouldn't boost it. Set that to 0. Look at the out is even blaring. So I guess I'm still in the debugging stage here. Tag has a converter. It's supposed to. Release has a converter. It's supposed to. Threshold does not have a converter. Ratio does not have a converter. Well, gain. Gain does have a converter, but it's the right converter. It is not, right? Okay. So even still the pre. Yeah, so that's a problem here. Because that's changing it into decibels. Or it's changing it into volts when it doesn't need to because it's already from decibel to volts. This already contains a volts to decibel or decibel to volts. All right. Okay. Build. Make sure it's not running. It is. Okay. Save file first. Yes. And no, because the naming is wrong. Let's call this gain. Build again. Okay. Save file first. Yes. So this is one of the more fun parts of SynthEdit, right? Debugging. All right. So bringing in the compressor again. I'm just going to test it after the debugging stage. skipping steps and missing things. Okay, so now it looks like it is working properly. Yes. Okay. Because when you add an effect or a synth, it should stay stable. It shouldn't overload. It shouldn't, specifically effects shouldn't affect the level if it's not turned on. So now I'm just going to remove this from my test signal here. Head back to this guitar, drop it on the guitar, and see what's going on here. So I got a little riff here. It should not affect the signal, right? Down, so it's not bleeding in from the stream. Okay. So it's sort of the same deal as a limiter. However, we can create a bit of distortion with the compressor by bringing the release to a low value, and the release now has a 0 value, so which is quite dangerous. However, mainly with compressors, what we want to do is balance the levels, right? So it looks like we're coming in about cold at around 24, and then hot at about 15. It's about 10. So let's drop it to say 20. As well, we don't have a starting point, so it's in fact 15 to 25. So let's drop it all the way down to 25 here. Still nothing. Oh, because I don't have a ratio. So sort of a ratio, let's go 7.5. And here they're really pumping, right? Assuming it's best to limit the signal or compress the signal, however it is breaking apart a little bit. Okay. So then what I want to do is bring it up a little bit here. 15. Can really hear that pumping. It's already quite weak, so to get rid of that pumping, we can maybe back off a bit. 100, but we don't really want it, right? Oops. So that's super tight. You can really hear that pumping there. Back off quite a bit. Essentially, pumping is not something we want. So let's go a whole second here. In fact, let's just back off all the way and see it continue to have dynamics. And sort of back into it. What does it look like without two? This might be a cooked sample already. So it does look like there's a bit of like some release there. And I'm kind of pulling on it. Jump into it here. You can see that right away it really squares out the waves. It looks like some parts aren't though, so this must be the top end and this is the low end. So see if we can get that low end squared out as well. So let's bring it into about 150. It's really pulling it now. Let's drive some more. So let's go 35. Just about to the point where we're maxing out the. Let's see here. Everything is looking quite square, right? But it's also looking consistent. So let's boost this up. 30. It doesn't go to 30. It just goes to 18, right? So that's as max as it's gonna get. Some pumping, so maybe we can go to 250. You can see less square, right? Now, I'm going to back off the attack a bit, and what's going to happen is the attack transient's going to jump. So let's go about 20 milliseconds. And you see that attack popping out here, leaking a bit. Let's try 60 milliseconds here, because I really want it to pop. Bringing that drum. And after that, the drum is staying quite quiet. So let's back off a bit here. So line up with the drum. let's go about 6. It's unfortunate that the samples and stuff are so low. As well, the tools are kind of limited, no pun intended, with the limiter. In fact, I could just drop the limiter. Before I do that, though, I'm going to copy over the values from the compressor. I'm just going to grab the compressor and toss it over here. Then I want sort of that release time of 20 and a threshold of -18. Right. Attack is 0. Release time 20. Ratio. We'll go full ratio. So it's just another sort of limiter. However, I'm going to take this limiter and put that on the master, generally where the limiter is supposed to be. Now, I can kind of back off the drums a bit. We'll see how it sounds. I'm going to get rid of this top limiter here. So I still got that flavor. Oh, I still have this limiter here. I wonder if the flavor's still doubling down on that flavor. Okay, so let's drop this limiter. Again, let's back into it to about 36. We're going to double. We're just going to cook it. Super cooked now. Let's go 28. Because I want to bring body up, right? However, the gain is not letting me push any harder than that. Not the most amazing track. Now that I have a limiter here, and the track is completely here. So that's 0. We actually just want to limit at 3 here. Loosen up that release and push the pre-gain kind of hard. So maybe let's sort of cook. It's a little too hard. 6. Go back into this guitar some more to bring it out a little more. Like I said, nothing spectacular as far as a composition. However, it's sort of a quick demonstration of really overusing compressors and limiters. So I'm going again to take a short break and come back for continuing with compressors. There's more. Continuing along, adding an RMS level detector. Up to this point, our level detector focused on signal peaks to create peak limiters and peak compressors. But some users may wish to detect overall loudness rather than peaks. RMS, root mean square, frequently serves this end, making the level detector behave more like the human ear. RMS entails taking the square of n input samples, the mean average, and then the square root. Stated mathematically, this is x subscript RMS equals square root of 1 over n, n summed I equals 1, x to the power of 2 with a subscript of I, to the root of x superscript 2 subscript 1 plus x superscript 2 subscript 2 plus triple dot plus x superscript 2 subscript n over n. How to average. Two methods serve to compute a signal's average, moving average and infinite impulse response filters. A moving average filter takes the weighted sum of n inputs. An infinite response filter takes the weighted sum of inputs and outputs. We'll use the latter. The impulse response of a first-order IR filter, like the one-pole LP filter in SynthEdit, is an exponentially decaying signal. So recent samples are given more weight. In reality, though, response is endless. Hence the name infinite impulse response. a one-pole filter's time constant is the time it takes to reach the level of 1 over exponent, or about 37% of the original level. Now let's do the math for a one-pole filter. The equation of calculating a signal is y square brackets n equals left bracket 1 subtract a right bracket times x square brackets n plus a times y square brackets n negative 1. The relationship between a and the one-pole filter's time constant. A equals negative 1 over exponent superscript f subscript s superscript t. I'm not sure if that's fst. It's really weird. Here is the time constant in seconds, and f subscript s, the sampling frequency. The relationship between the cutoff and the cutoff frequency is. The relationship between a and the cutoff frequency is a equals exponent left bracket negative 2 times pi times f over fs left bracket. So a whole lot of math. I don't understand any of that. It's also a mouthful to say. It follows that the mathematical relationship between the filter's time constant and frequency is frequency, or f, equals 1 over 2 pi t. Here is the time constant in seconds. So if we want an averaging filter with a time constant of 1 millisecond, we can use a one-pole low-pass filter with a 159 hertz cutoff frequency. Figuring out RMS. The setup figure in 2.86 performs an RMS calculation. It squares the signal and then averages it by using a one-pole low-pass filter. Equation 1 is the reference for setting the filter's frequency. Then it takes the square root. Figure 2.87 shows the square root structure. So figure 2.86 calculating RMS, that's really great. Input in an IO mod input going to a multiply, both inputs, input 1 and input 2 on the multiply, going out to a one-pole low-pass filter, going into a container that says square root. And that square root container goes out to an IO mod. We used a WaveShaper 2 module to calculate the square root, which can apply any transfer curve to a signal. In essence, it is a wavetable with an arbitrary mathematical function. However, its input signal is limited to -5 to +5. The compressor's input value usually ranges from -10 to +10. So the square will lie in the 1, or rather 0 to 100 volt range. Dividing it by 10 and subtracting 5 scales it to -5 to +5. After this, we use the function square root left bracket x plus 5 right bracket divided by 10 right bracket times 10. The x variable represents the input value. The other operations serve to scale it. This structure provides the square root of voltages between 0 and 100 volts. So to figure 2.87, calculating the square root. We have an IO mod coming into a multiply, and that's going into a WaveShaper. And on top of the multiply, we have fixed values with the value of -5. Looks like -5 going into the WaveShaper. WaveShaper 2 shows the plotting of a formula that's punched into the WaveShaper 2, square root, left bracket, x plus 5, right bracket, divide by 10, right bracket, times 10. And the signal goes to an IO mod output. So again, lots of math, lots of really heavy math. Thinking through it and going through it over and over again might absorb a little more, but I just don't understand it. It's something I'm hoping to eventually understand one day, because I would like to change the sort of length of the RMS meter. Because wait, no, it is doing 1 millisecond, a time constant 1 millisecond. I'm not sure. Heads up, feel free to also use Oli Larkin's OL square root module to compute a signal square root. Adding an RMS level detector to the compressor. Now that we have prefabs for calculating RMS level, we can add the selector for detecting peak/RMS levels. See figure 2.88 for its structure. Depending on the choice, the peak or RMS value goes to the DH_max module, then to the peak follower module for adjusting attack and release settings. Figure 2.88, we see an IO mod with one mode on top and two inputs. Those are going to two switches, one to many. So the mode is attached to both of them, which is likely the choice selector, and then each of the inputs to each one of them. From there, the top one and the bottom one go to a separate RMS box, which likely contains the RMS calculator. And then those go to the DH max. DH max is one and out. And in our case, I'm using a list, comparator and a list, and then that max out goes to IO mod. Figure 2.88, a switchable peak/RMS level detector. The RMS detector's time constant is somewhat of an arbitrary choice. Plugins use values ranging from 1 to 30 milliseconds. The lower the time constant, the more sensitive the compressor to sudden peaks. At a very low time constant, the RMS detector behaves almost like a peak detector. This structure uses a 3 millisecond time constant. To this end, we set the one pole's cutoff frequency to 1 divided by left bracket 2 times pi times 0.003 equaling 53 hertz. Go to the files, effects dynamics, compressor 2. So again, I would like to be able to figure out how to change that 3 milliseconds to, say, 30 or 1, right? However, I haven't the foggiest because of all the math. However, it's on to the next schematic here, which contains the RMS detector, which I'm going to have to build, right? So I did change the file name for this. However, I did not change the module name. Go ahead and do that. Head in here and head over to the comparator here, the volts to list, and the switch many to 1. So this is my max module in essence. Now I'm going to grab all three of these, right click, more, containerize. We now have a container, and I'll call this, what do they call it? Level detection. Okay. So level detection. However, in the other schematic here, we see mode is on top. We have list entry. In this case, my mode is going to have to just be on the bottom. I don't really feel like resorting. So I'm just going to bring in this list entry. I believe the one it's showing is probably and then this entry, if you click it and then we go to the right panel here, we see appearance and then down selector. Selector. No, must be up down selector. Button stack, rotary switch, so up down selector. Doesn't look exactly the same. I do believe this is a GUI build. However, there isn't one in the subcontrols here. There is just a list entry 4, which will require me to actually build it right, and I'm just not doing that. I'm just going to use this. So I'm going to connect that there. And this will be my selector here. So at this point, there's my max. I am going to have to disconnect that stuff. In fact, I guess choice can be on top. So I'm just going to pull everything here. Because I have to anyways. And then I can get rid of these out ports. And then choice will now be up top. Now I want a flow control, I believe 1 to many and twice. Page up. No, page down. Okay, so yeah. Switch 1 to many, and I want 2 of those. Let's plug in the choice now. And then this is left and right signal here. Right. And now I have to create the RMS detector. So I'm going to drop in a new container. I'll just name this RMS. Hit in here, drop this in there, and jump here, here. Actually, I'll use the book, right? Page up. Okay, so I'm going to multiply. It's the wrong SynthEdit. Let's go math, multiply here. And is that first? It is. So I want the signal coming in twice to take both of the multiplies, which I believe is root or square root, right? No, it's exponential. Okay. That goes into a math, a filter, one pole low pass, and I have to set this pitch. I'm just going to look at this one. That's why this one's open. If ever I feel like feels like opening with locked, so it's unlock it again. That's locked, let's unlock that because I'm going to get into there. I want to see the properties of this one pole low pass. It did say in the book, however, yeah, so 0.035 or 53 rather, and it's using the frequency scale of 1 volt by kilohertz. So I'm just going to punch that in here and switch this to kilohertz. Then from there, there's the RMS or the square root. So I'm going to unlock this. Actually, there's no real point in it. However, I'm going to bring in another container and call this square root. Okay. And then this one pole low pass goes there. Get into here, bring this down here. And I believe I want a wave shaper, right? I want to multiply first and a fixed value. So those fixed values. Just get this grid here. Another math. Multiply. And then those go into wave shaper 2. It doesn't have to be wave shaper 2. It can be wave shaper 2B without the grid. I'm going to use that one. I want to be top. So IOMod into the top of the multiply into the wave shaper, fixed values, flow volts into the wave shaper. And this is what, -5, right? Yes, -5. Just gonna make absolutely sure. Yes. And then what's in the bottom of the multiply here? Properties 0.1. Okay, so 0.1, which is essentially divide by 10, right? And then in the wave shaper, I want to type square root left bracket x plus 5, right bracket divide by 10, right bracket times 10. And we see that it's compiled correctly. It's compiled at all. And we're going to send that out. So that's done. That's the RMS there. Or square root rather. And I want the IO mod to finish it off. Just checking. Good. So I now have an RMS detector. So I'll plug that in. Actually, which is first here? Peak is first. Okay, so I'm going to send peak here to the comparator, right? That's the max. And then I want the list, switch many to 1, and that's it chooses which is louder and uses that one as the reference, maintaining the stereo balance. Okay, so this is called peak. Again, down here, peak. And then this goes to the 1 RMS, the second choice. And I'm just going to drop that down here, duplicate the RMS. I'm not sure, I must have not hit enter for that. So RMS, naming the second choice. Again, I gotta name this peak. Shift tab, down, tab, shift, home, shift end, and type RMS. Okay. Now the RMS also has to go to the comparator. So to left and right again, and then the same thing to the switch. So when the one-to-many switch decides between the peak or RMS, it will be the only signal heading to the ladder modules. So that is our signal detector, which now includes RMS. So check, yes. Patches look good. Okay. And now I have a list entry here. Just going to go ahead and look at what it looks like here. I think it might just be all jumbled together. Yeah, it's just off to the side there. It doesn't even incorporate it. So I'm going to go ahead and incorporate that. I'm just going to move this over. I'm going to call this selector. What's it called? Mode. Okay, so it's called mode. Then I'm just going to open this up a bit here. I'm going to stick it right in the middle. So try to align it here-ish. Probably about there. How does that look? A little more spacing, one more spacing, just to kind of be consistent. Okay. Then I'll grab this preset manager. Redo that. And center this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And center the background, or rather extend the background if ever I can grab it from somewhere. Okay, there. Oh, no. Grab it. Okay, and it is behind everything. All right, so that now creates an RMS signal detector. And however, it's not connected to anything, right? Okay, so let's get it connected to inputs here, and then this goes to the peak follower. Hopefully that it's done right. If it isn't done right, then skip to, I'll probably include chapters in this YouTube video. So that, because I've done so many fumbles here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and build it. There's nothing else there, like there's no other compressor, right? It's a brand new build, and I'll call this C2. Okay, save file first, yes. I'm going to head over to FL whilst that builds. And let's rescan here. All right, see, much faster. Compressor 2 is now there. And for a demonstration, I'm going to make a bass. RMS can tackle that bass. Okay, so I got essential guitars again. There should be some bass in here, I'm sure. No? So I'm going to go get essential bass. Essential bass guitars. Take a moment to download. I do have Wi-Fi 7, so it should be quite fast. Wi-Fi 7, I think. The newer one in 2024, anyway. I mentioned sometime in the future, someone will be watching this and have Wi-Fi 9 or something. Okay. So, it's all sorts of basses in here. What am I listening to? Maybe a slapped bass just to cut through the mix. Eden slap, Golden Eden. Get that a listen. Turn off all this stuff here. Dark slap bass. Okay. Not really, it's really muffly. Deeper purple, good 80 slap. Explosive slapping bass guitar. Okay, yeah, that's what I want. I'm going to turn off all this stuff here. And then I'm just going to copy over this. Put it on some pattern. Then I'm going to extend things. Let's drop these extra notes. Then I'm just going to do quick legato. And then I'll just use the arpeggiator here. And I'll go up one, range 2, and let's give that to a quick listen. Okay, so I still have that limiter on. These peaks, so it's quite dynamic, right? Send that to 3. Okay, open that up. It's so quiet. Is it not sending to master? It is not. Okay, because that's where that test signal was. All right, so bringing in compressor 2 now. And in this case, I want to use the RMS. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the guitar and then turn it into an RMS. So starting with the guitar settings, got a threshold -35. Actually, I'll wait for the threshold because I want to see what the levels are at. A release of 200 and a ratio of 7.5. So let's see where things are at here. So it's coming in quite hot. Perhaps I'll match the guitar's level. So I can do that by turning off the effect here. Just looking at where the guitar is. This effect. And this. It's really loud. So I'm just going to use then back this compressor here. Oh, so it's still running. I turn it off. Okay. Let's get the bass sort of in line with that. Because I matched those levels, I can now just use the exact same values. Threshold, -35, and gain of 8. So there's that. And then again, let's have 60 here. So back transients back. So it's nice and thick, everything's consistent. However, let's see what happens when we use RMS. Will we still do that pumping? It should reduce, right? Okay, so not as grainy here. Not as pumpy. I'm sure I can even tighten it up some more since we're at 75. It's a cleaner sort of sound using RMS. Peak. Wait away. Just stop pumping. So stick to RMS here, and I'm just going to back off a bit. And we'll match the guitar, and then bring in all the instruments. Again, not the greatest composition, and just a demonstration of what the compressors and limiters can do. Speaking of limiters, let's bring limiter back in. I'm making a sausage here now, which is not a good thing. But again, just a demonstration. So again, I'm going to take a quick BRB and come back for the final section of the compressor. Continuing along, creating a soft knee compressor. So we've discussed hard knee dynamic compression. Let's back up a bit to find out what a knee is and how it affects the sound. Check out the two curves in figure 2.89. When bends hard at the threshold level, compressors with this type of transfer function are called hard knee compressors. The dotted line is a smooth curve called a soft knee. Compressors with this transfer function are called soft knee compressors. A soft knee compressor's gain reduction kicks in at a very low ratio. a few decibels below the threshold. As the signal approaches this threshold, the ratio increases until it arrives at the threshold. This transfer function comes courtesy of analog circuitry, where diodes do this smoothing. Many plugins offer soft knee compression because it sounds more musical. So let's create a soft knee compressor. Figure 2.89, soft and hard knee compression. We see sort of another graph here, but it doesn't have any graph lines. And it's just a box with on the y-axis, it says output level dB pointing up, and on the x-axis, input level dB pointing right. And then on the graph right in the middle, we have an intersection point where it says hard knee, and it's a very sharp point. Underneath that, we have dotted lines. Looks like a bit of a webbing. It's got quite a bit of a bend. It says soft knee. And then there's a super dotted line, like a really fine dot pointing up into the center from the middle, from the bottom middle to the center. It says threshold. In our early examples, the clipper module shaped the transfer curve shown in figure 2.9. Above 0, the output level equals the input level. Below 0, the input level equals 0. Smoothing out this curve with a knee replacing the sharp corner changes the compressor's characteristics. Figure 2.9, transfer curve of a clipper module. So we see a grid, another graph, but it's more of a grid now. So it looks more like a reticle. We have 4 axes, so a negative and positive y and negative and positive x, and each are in the range of 5. And the hard knee is represented by a solid line coming from -5 to 0 and then veering off between +5 and +5x, +5y and +5x. Let's use Wave Shaper 2 to this end. Figure 2.9, transfer curve of a clipper module. So let's use a Wave Shaper 2 module to this end. Note figure 2.91. We employed an exponential function in conjunction with a min and ABS function to create a curve. Use this structure in the clipper modules instead of endow the compressor with a soft knee. The multiply module scales levels so that 1 volt equals 10 dB. The knee spans from about -15 to +10 dB around the threshold. Though not much of a range, it is enough to smooth the sound of touch. Subtract this function from x to arrive at the transfer curve shown in figure 2.91. Figure 2.91, a soft knee prefab showing transfer curve. We have an IO mod coming into a multiply. That multiply does not have a bottom pin. It's going directly into a wave shaper signal in the wave shaper signal. Wave shaper 2 shows a formula of min, left bracket exp, left bracket x, -1, right bracket, comma, ABS, left bracket x, -1, right bracket, +1, right bracket. And the graph shows sort of a bend, a bit of an elbow that veers off. Then the wave shaper signal out goes to another multiply, which in turn goes to an IO mod out. Now there's a second wave shaper, and it's not connected to anything. Its formula is x -min, right bracket exponential, or exp, right bracket x -1. Rather, left brackets. There's a right bracket, comma, ABS, left bracket x -1, right bracket +1, right bracket. And that shows an opposite of elbow, with the curve coming in from the negative zone, bending around, just barely crossing over 0, so about 0.5, and then straight lining. So I imagine it's sort of a representation of the curve. It's not really a application wave shaper, so to speak. To let the user choose between a soft and a hard knee, add a structure with switches rather than the clipper module. See figure 2.92 for a structure that selects the type of knee. It sports two switches, one to many and many to one. Here's why. When the one to many switch selects the hard knee, the module with the soft knee container. The modules in the soft knee container go to sleep, yet they continue to issue residual constant voltages from previous calculations. A second switch prevents this constant voltage from influencing the sound. Usually, one-to-many switches are preferable, this being an exception. To learn more about optimizing patches, see the chapter Making the Most of Performance from page 181 onwards. Figure 2.92 shows an I/O mod. On top it says input, on the bottom it says choice, and choice and input cross over into a switch one-to-many. Choice also continues to another switch many to one down chain. However, in the middle, there's a clipper and a soft knee container, a container that says soft knee. Then the last switch, many to one, heads to an I/O mod output. Figure 9.2, soft/hard knee selector. Now that you're a proud owner of a flexible compressor limiter plugin with a variable knee and switchable peak/RMS level detection, figure 2.93 pictures the GUI. Figure 2.93, the compressor's user interface. So on the figure 2.93, we have 5 knobs in the order: threshold, attack, release, ratio, gain, 3 peak meters, in-out GR, and 2 list entries stacked on top of each other. One is mode with RMS, and the bottom is knee. It says soft. Mode also probably contains peak, and knee on the bottom also contains hard. Go to files, effects, dynamics, compressor 3.se1. Heads up, use a wave shaper module in place of wave shaper 2, and you can create just about any transfer function. I'm not sure that's really such a good idea. However, yeah. Interesting. So I've already gone ahead and loaded compressor 3 and changed the name of the work file here to compressor 3. Now I want to intersect somewhere around here to bring in the new knee here. So the intersection happens between happens between the voltage to the decibel goes to subtract, and then subtract goes to the knee, and then knee goes to the multiply. So in between subtract and knee. So in place of the clipper, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to containerize the clipper to get it started. Signal in, signal out, get inside here. And as it's stated, we want both a one-to-many and many-to-one. And that's to nullify any residual sort of charge or value still being sent from either. So which is first here? I believe clipper would be on top. So clipper's on top. I'm going to send the first value here to the clipper and then the first value out to the clipper. However, I just realized that there's a choice there. So I'm going to kill the patches because that's what I usually do. I like the list entries on the top. So send those choices out and then bring in the inputs and send the outputs. Then I want another container, and this I believe we'll call, is there names on these? Yeah, so this is called softney container. Input output mod, I want a new view here. Input output mod. Inside this container, the softney, I have the, because it's locked. The wave shapers, right? Okay, however, they are multiplied, right? To see what these values are, I do believe they're multiplied by 0.1. So going into modifiers, wave shaper 2 with the graph and multiply. So math multiply by 0.1. Then the IO mod here comes in and then out. And wave shaper after that probably scales back up. So another multiply properties by 10. So I'm not 100% sure what this extra window is. I believe it's just to show the transfer curve, which isn't really equivalent. Right? Like if we look at it, it actually doesn't look the exact same. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on there. However, I'm not going to be including it because it doesn't do anything if it's just sitting there. So I believe this will be multiplied by 10. It is multiplied by 10. And then that goes to an output. So IO mod, send that out and just tidy up a little bit here. Then I want the formula. Just grab it directly. And I'm not going to speak it out again. I'm just going to punch it in. And that's done. So let's off me here, the second choice. Choices are already in there. The clipper is already set up. I'm going to get the signals running. And that goes to multiply. Now I want a second peak, or rather second list controller here. So put that into choice. And then this is called knee. Okay. All right. And I need to rename these. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is hard. Shift tab down, tab, shift end, soft. Enter. Again, the second one, and this is hard. HARD, shift tab down, tab, shift end, delete, soft. Okay. And I'm just going to drop a container in here so they can make sure they update. They did. Delete that container. I could have tidied it up, but it's fine. Okay, so the GUI is pretty much already waiting for it. I'm just going to move this up and stack things here. A little tight. It's fine. How does it look here? Yeah, they're quite tight. They actually line up here. So let's see if I can do that. The likelihood is a low. Yeah. A little 1, 2, 3, 4. It's too high. 1, 2. Okay, so they line up. No. However, it still looks pretty cramped, and I'm not sure why the white here on the arrows never got their transparency. Even a mask, so I don't know. Just an oversight on the developer's part, I suppose. So that's done. And done. Go ahead and save. Export, rather. Name this compressor 3. Compressor 3. I actually think I have a compressor 3 in there. Let's see. As it's not actually saving the right place, which is fine. I'll just go ahead and export it. Just want to check FL because I do believe there's a 3. Yeah, because I did do a workup before this stream and this video just to make sure that things were working properly and what I had to watch out for, even though I still managed to fall in the sort of skipping steps trap. Very chapter should nullify that. Okay, so what am I going to do here? I'll export it with a different name right now. I'll just call this compressors 3 demo, I suppose. And then before I make the preset, I'll change the name back to 3. So this is CC3, manufacturer ID, ABCD. Go ahead and build that. Save file first. Yes. Okay, so this is compressor 3 demo. I'm not sure what it's saved as. I think it actually saved over 3. Hopefully I didn't ruin anything. I can always recover anyway. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, so last instrument with a sort of hard knee, soft knee. Let's go with a synth, right? So pick something a little different this time. GMS, I guess. And we'll go with a lead and something thick. Maybe something like a bell or something. There wasn't a search on here. Okay, I got a bell here. Some bell. Something to soft limit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this part here from the guitar. I'll drop that here, and then I'm going to get rid of these chords. And that should be a sufficient sort of bell layered in. So weird. All right. So let's send that to channel 4. I'm going to mute everything else. And get into that. So, 3. This looks like the old one. I think we're going to rescan, right? So it'll be named Demo, Compressor 3 Demo. But I think I saved over my other work file, which sucks. Okay, so send to focus plugin. Just drag and drop. Okay, there. That's the one I want. So in this case now I want to soften it with a peak here. And then let's look at where this level is. I just kind of want it sitting in the background. It's already quite loud. It also has a reverb, so take advantage of that softening. But I am going to cook it. In this case, I'm just going to sort of limit. Actually, we'll go soft, right? With 7.5 on all the other versions, just to demonstrate what it's doing. So 3.75. It's the weird number, right? And I'm going to back completely off. And because it's the bell, I want that transient, that attack transient to come through. However, I'm going to start limiting it now. And I'm going to limit it quite thick because I'm only using a 3.8. So let's try -21 to start with. Look at that, the readout here. We can see that the max is actually working because the levels are, besides the bass is a mono instrument, so it doesn't have a stereo image. For the most part, it shouldn't, for the most part. All right. So let's look at without here. How do I bypass? Just use threshold like that. So we got this big attack. And let's do my best here to sort of level out these. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to exaggerate it a bit more, just so I can split the dynamics here. So tension, something like that. I'm not sure what this one is. Oops. Replay. Maybe just to the point where it's actually there. Okay, so now we can see the dynamic range here is quite substantial. And what this synth is doing is, I think I'm pretty sure it's changing baseline dynamics, right? It's quite muted down here. So let's see if we can pull that sort of sound out by some threshold here. I'm not sure what boost it does. Okay, so let's cook it a bit here. Still not quite touching. A little more, say 24, 7, 7, oops, 7. not a lot of ratio. So let me back off a little bit. So that's 3, that's 5, 20, 6.5. Then I'm going to leave the softening off, and I'm going to lean into it. Right, so now we can see getting some sort of distortion. Back off a bit. These are shorter sounds, so we're going to shorter release. Maybe just to the point where we start to see that distortion happening. It's just starting. Let's try 20. You can see that it's bending the waveform into the negative because it has that limiter, right? Not the greatest compressors. So let's back off the attack now to bring that in, and we'll want like a deep. Let's go 50 milliseconds here. There we go. So we got a major attack. However, the most of the body is still there. So let's actually bring it in. We'll just reel it in. So there's probably pumping there, but because it's such a bright instrument, it's really hard to hear it. So I'm gonna back off now. Softening. Maybe RMS. Where does peak? Because it's more of a staccato instrument. Alright, so let's mix that in. Make sure that limiter is off, so we can hear let's actually bring it in a little bit. So it's consistent-ish volume. The volume's a bit more consistent. Compared to without. So the release is quite more consistent. The attacks are a little different, so we still keep some dynamics. Mix them in. Without. So the touch notes get kind of buried, right? The soft notes. Stick out a little more. That's a modest squeeze. I'm gonna back off on that squeeze. So the squeeze is like balance, really tough. So it's like nothing happening. The game is actually still says it's doing something, I'm not sure why. 3. That's all it's doing now, it's just eating. Not much of a sausage anymore. Again, not the greatest composition, just some presets and some riff generator and a demonstration of all the different dynamics tools that come sort of with SynthEdit, sort of made the few different compressors types. Stepping through the levels, applications are different. I think there's one more, right? All right, so that's it for this documentation. The prefabs will be available in my Patreon. Check out my website, jwpsite.com, for my social links, latest news and updates, and public offerings. My Twitch, JWP Stream, Facebook, JWP Meta, YouTube at JWPTube. If you'd like to help support what I do, check out my Patreon, JWP Patreon. That's with 2 P's. There's exclusive content there for making your own audio plugins in SynthEdit, my GoFundMe, JWP Fund, or my PayPal, jwpmas@gmail.com. Likes, comments, subscribes, follows, whatever makes you click are appreciated. Thanks for watching. Until next time.